The ghost of Cobblers Reef. Off the rugged southeast coast of Barbados, where ancient coral cliffs meet the Atlantic, there's a reef with a long memory. Cobblers Reef has torn the hull out of ships for centuries. Sailors know it. East Point Lighthouse and charts warn of it. And yet, on a quiet January morning in 2026, something arrived here that no one had seen coming. A ship, 330 tons of steel, riding the swells, lodged on the reef, with no captain, no crew, and no one who could explain exactly how it got there. Her name was the Christina Debora. She was built in 1981 in the Netherlands, a standby safety vessel, the kind of ship designed to be nearby when other ships are in trouble. Over the decades, she wore many names: Philomena, Osprey, Catherine Gale. By 2025, she was the Christina Debora, and she was crossing the South Atlantic. Then, somewhere in the remote ocean between Ascension Island and St. Helena, roughly 300 nautical miles from the nearest land, her clutch pack failed. The engines fell silent and the ship stopped. 300 miles from shore, in one of the most isolated stretches of water on Earth. The crew called for help. But here is where the story gets strange. While the captain reached the world through Facebook, posting updates, coordinating rescues through a civilian contact named Johnny Clingham, a St. Helenan living in the UK, the ship's automatic identification system, the AIS transponder that should have been broadcasting her position to maritime authorities around the clock, had been dark since she left Cape Town months earlier. 300 tons of steel, completely invisible to the system built to track her. A bulk carrier ship named the Areti tried to reach them, but was turned back by swells running 4 to 5 meters. It took another 4 days before supplies finally got through. Food, water, welding equipment. The crew attempted a fix. It held for 5 days. Then the clutch failed again, this time beyond repair. On June 22nd, 2025, the 7-man crew was rescued by the MV Theseus and carried to Cape Town, and the Christina Debora, still floating, still drifting, was left behind. The South Atlantic had her now. What happened next is, in its own quiet way, extraordinary. For 221 days, the Christina Debora drifted. No engine, no crew, no signal, just steel and the tide and current, moving at an average of 30 miles a day through some of the most untracked waters on the planet, the same stretch sailors called the doldrums. She crossed 4,000 miles. Think about that. In an age of satellites and transponders, real-time vessel tracking, a 38-meter or 125-foot steel ship traveled the equivalent of the distance from London to New York and completely disappeared. No one watching, no alarm. Somewhere between the equator and the Caribbean, she became what maritime officials called a ghost vessel. And then, as if guided by something older than GPS, she found Cobblers Reef. This is where history and the present collide. The cliffs above Cobblers Reef are home to Sam Lord's Castle, a grand Regency-era plantation house built by a man of considerable cunning and questionable ethics. All Bajans know the legend. Sam Lord would hang the lanterns in the coconut trees on moonless nights, mimicking the lights of Bridgetown. Ships would steer towards them and run aground on the reef below. Sam Lord would then plunder the wreck at his leisure. The last major vessel claimed by the reef before Christina Debora was a Norwegian bark, the Nordenskjold. That was in 1910. 115 years later, a vessel built specifically to prevent maritime disasters arrived on the same reef, not by lantern light, but by current and in silence, after 7 months adrift through 4,000 miles of international waters with no one on board. No legend, no deception, just the sea, doing what the sea has always done. A fisherman spotted the silhouette resting offshore, and Barbados moved fast. Drones from the Barbados Defence Force swept the hull for structural damage and surface pollutants. Divers from the Coast Guard went under. The Coastal Zone Management Unit and Department of Emergency Management began assessing whether a 330-ton displacement vessel could even be safely refloated. Environmental officers readied absorbent booms along the beach, because if the Christina Debora wasn't leaking yet, the moment you start pulling a wreck off coral, you find out what she's been holding inside. And then came the question that modern maritime law was not entirely built to answer. Whose ship is this? She flew a Tanzania flag. She was managed by a company based in South Africa, but with a formal address in Rarotonga, Cook Islands. Having been abandoned in international waters months ago, she entered Barbadian waters in what officials called a liability void. No owner present, no captain, no responsible party to respond to the press and local authorities. Major Robert Harewood of the Department of Emergency Management made the government's position plain. You cannot simply push a ghost ship back into the sea and hope for the best. She should be removed and located to an agreed location. After several attempts, the efforts to refloat her were abandoned. She was firmly wedged into the reef. At the time of this recording, in July 2026, she remains wedged, listing a little to one side, waves relentlessly pounding her steel hull. The Christina Debora is not the only ghost out there. Maritime researchers estimate that hundreds of vessels are drifting the world's oceans at any given moment, abandoned by owners, invisible to satellites, waiting for the right current. Most of them will never be found. Most will simply sink quietly far from shore, leaking whatever they carry into the water no one monitors. This one was found on a reef with a 400-year reputation of swallowing ships, off the coast of an island that knows the sea the way a few places on Earth still do. The Christina Debora made a 4,000-mile voyage and never showed up on a single official chart. And when she finally arrived, she arrived exactly where the Atlantic decided she should go. The sea, as it turns out, has its own navigation system, and it has a very, very long memory.